War Eagle, and good morning, good afternoon to you whenever you're watching this. This is another edition of Auburn Family News live stream chats here on E2C Network Live. And I thank you for joining us once again. This is take 2 for many of you that joined the stream a couple of minutes ago. Audio issues on one end of my stream here, and we had to abandon it, and it was just it. Right now, this morning, my technical issues are going about as well as the Auburn football coaching search, if I'm honest. So I think everybody should be able to hear me now, see me, all those good things, because it's as simple as plugging in something correctly, and it was not. Hopefully that is the case now. It shows me that my audio is live here on YouTube, so I think we're good now. Anyway, thank you for joining me. Right now, some hashtags already being thrown in there. We'll address that in just a second. Let me get through my beginning stuff here before we do. For those of you that don't know us, we are the E2C Network. We're a family of podcasts about Auburn family stuff. If you have not checked our stuff out, I hope that you'll do so. You can find it on any podcast format out there. Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, everything in between. If it's not on your podcast app of choice, please let us know. We'll get it there for you. I hope you'll check all that stuff out. There's also ways you can help support the content just like this, but mainly our podcast as well, get out there more, is by joining our Patreon campaign we have called the E2C Network Booster Club. You can join for as little as $1 a month. It helps support the content that we do here and get yourself some perks on the side. So that is all the boilerplate stuff at the beginning. Typically, what we do is we get on here and I have a list of Auburn news and stuff that I want to discuss, and that ranges from everything. Can be sports related, non-sports related. If it's orange and blue, we cover it here. And there are things in the spectrum of Auburn that we would probably want to talk about, but we may not get to. But I just want to mention them offhand. Auburn women's basketball got a win last night, and then two former Auburn men's basketball players are back together at the pro level. So just want to mention that. If we get to them, we get to them. But I know what you're here for, and I know what you really got most on your mind right now, and that is related to the Auburn football head coach search, which has been quite the journey. And I think that's what we'll talk about mainly here. As you come into the live stream, if you are watching live, I do ask that you hit the like button if you're enjoying what you're watching. If you're not, okay. On Twitter, if you'll hit the like button as well, retweet, share it out on your personal profile. It does help get more people in here to join the conversation. And please don't be shy. Leave a comment, a question. We'll address it here. Just keep it civil. And we'll have some fun with it along the way. It's always more fun to talk with you. And if you're watching on the replay, you can do the same thing. Leave comments and questions, and we'll address them as we can get to them after the fact. But, please don't be shy. War Eagle, let me know who's here, and we'll get started here. So the title of this edition of discussing Auburn family news stuff is the Auburn football coach search. Mario Cristobal is out, so who's next? That's the $1 million question, right? Who's next? Let me go ahead and we'll just open the floor right here before I kind of get into my opening thoughts about that. I want to hear from you all. Who do you want as the next head football coach, now knowing that Mario Cristobal is off the table? I'm going to be honest with you. I think some of y'all are going to give some answers that I'm going to make you feel really bad about because I know a few things. I don't know all the things, but I know a few of them. And it's going to make some of y'all a little bit more upset than you've already been right now. That's the one I was expecting, Wes. Kiffin, that was the one. Well, I guess I did. To be fair, I asked the question, who do you want? That's a fair statement. Who will it be? That's the reality. Daniel, I'm going to address what you said earlier on the thing too, but he wrote Napier or Elliott. Both names that are common out there. Wes says def want. Keep wanting, my friend. And I say that as someone that would be willing to entertain the thought of Kiffin, not necessarily. Sark is out there. I'll address that in a little bit. But yeah, Sark's out there. Wiz Dragon on YouTube says, I'm warming up to Sark from Bama. What scares me about y'all is that you're warming up. Listen to that statement. You're warming up to something from Bama. That's what scares me. RDG on YouTube says Dan Quinn. Clearly he's not an Atlanta Falcons fan. Do you want to blow a lead again? I don't. Yeah, so those are a lot of the names here. And let me go ahead and look. I think Daniel is still watching on Twitter, and I don't mean this to be mean, but if you are part of the hashtag Stop Steal campaign, you need to stop it. You just do. Those are things that you would never say to Kevin Steele's face. So if you, my policy on Twitter is if you wouldn't say it to a coach or player's face, don't say it. And I'm not saying that to like get all my high and mighty horse there, but it's childish. It really is. Like, stop it. Just stop it. Stop. It doesn't need to be stop steal. Stop the steal is what it should be, because you're going to probably have to get used to that, and you don't want to have to go back on Twitter and scrub your Twitter account or your Facebook account of things that you said. So that's why I try not to talk in absolutes. I just try to talk in preferences and reality and go from there. Wiz Dragon says 2020 is so messed up. We had Bama fans help vote in a former Auburn coach to the Senate, and now people are wanting a Bama coach to come to Auburn. Wiz, I don't know that. I don't know. I'm reading into your comment there. I think politically you and I are going to differ on some things then, if that's what you're implying there. But yeah, I mean, it's interesting. An Auburn coach is now. What's funny is I saw someone today. By the way, we have a Facebook group that acts as our like message board forum. By the way, if you're on a message board forum, get off of it. It literally will destroy your life. I'm watching it happen to some of my friends right now. Yeah, it's not good stuff. And I guess I probably shouldn't compare a Facebook to a message board, but it's like the same concept, but you have to like put your face and your name to it as opposed to Dude 5000, and you can't hide behind that. So there's potentially repercussions for all of that kind of stuff. So it's called Auburn Family Tree on Facebook. You can find it there and join it. We have a good group of people there, and we try to promote constructive conversations, not necessarily I hate this person, I hate that person, meaning coaches and players and stuff like that. We actually have several coaches and players, families of coaches and players that choose to come there because we try to make it such a welcoming place where they're not going to get bombarded with stupid things being said about their people. Wiz says we think we're on the same page. Okay, well, good. But you can obviously have differences of opinions on things, but I was just reading that comment. I was like, I don't know. Wiz Dragon also says, haven't been on Facebook in 5 years. That's probably a good thing. Eliminating some things. But if you ever come back, Auburn Family Tree is a place for you to hang out and discuss things with your Auburn family. So I think I've caught up on most of the current questions. I will come back to them as we get, so keep them coming. I will try to catch the Twitter ones first, though, as they come, because they do go away fast. And that's why I always recommend that you come over here to YouTube if you haven't. By the way, we have exploded in our subscribership. We're currently, I think, at, and I know by most channel standards this is very small, but I think we were like almost at 140 when I went live here, which is incredible. So thank y'all so much for doing that. And that's the easiest way. You get the better experience over here because of the audio and all that kind of stuff. But that way I can kind of keep track of your comments. The Twitter ones, they just go away really quickly. Brandon Seal says, what's with Anthony Schwartz's tweet last night? That's a great segue. The train emojis, yes. That's a great segue into what I want to talk about. But all of y'all that are on the Lane Kiffin train and trying to read things into the train emoji, remember, just because a Auburn athlete posts something doesn't mean it's fact. It could just be their preference. So we don't know. So if you haven't heard, Anthony Schwartz last night posted a tweet of, I think, 3 train emojis. It's easy to make the jump. That's Lane Kiffin, the Lane train. Could also be that his train is leaving the station, meaning he's ready to make the jump to the pros or do something else. I think it's honestly a 50-50 shot of whether it is, but the fact that people are reading into it that means Lane's coming, I think you're going to be disappointed. I did not address RDG says, not Hugh Freeze because Auburn would be in all kinds of trouble. Maybe, but not necessarily. Hugh Freeze is still on my preferential list, but when I look at what I know and the reality, it's not going to happen at this moment. Everything that I'm going to say in this stream is based on what I know now and based off what my, here's the fun word, sources are telling me. And I know that you can either believe that or not, but here's what I will tell you is that my number one source has been 100% correct, not just on who they think is going to be the coach and it's lining up that way, but also the pattern with which everything has happened. 100% correct. And I even told this person, don't ever let me question you again, because clearly what they know has been right this far. Also, our DG said James Franklin. That's a name that's being thrown out there. I don't see a lot of momentum behind it at the moment. I'm intrigued, but I'm not necessarily, on board with that. I'm not on the, there's not a train analogy you can make with James Franklin. But anyway, I don't know. The whole coaching search is a whole mess. Oh, that's the understatement of the year. 2020 is a whole mess, but 2020 and the Auburn coaching search go hand in hand. All right, so let me go ahead and set the table for you all that maybe are new to some of the streams that we've doing and some of the stuff, and just so you kind of know some context. And I'm going to try not to bore the people that have been here for a while and heard me do my spiel on this already. I am a huge Gus Malzahn fan, and I believe, and thus far have been proven true, that this was the biggest mistake that Auburn could have made, was to fire Gus Malzahn. I know some of you are going to disagree with that. I get it. But there are more of you that have disagreed with me that are starting to realize that with what information we have now, this was a huge, huge, huge mistake. So everything that I'm operating off in my discussion of this is the making the best of a terrible, bad situation. So this is not what I wanted, but I am forced with the reality that Gus Malzahn's not coming back. In fact, he's sitting in his living room right now laughing at all of us and the ridiculousness that we have put ourselves in. And I say we because even though I didn't want it, I'm part of the Auburn family. And as much as I love y'all make my head hurt sometimes with what y'all can't look past the emotions of a situation and our desire to win. I'm also operating off of the notion that you have to value something much more than winning. And if you don't, you will end up in this situation that we are currently in. You have to value something higher, more satisfying than winning in championships. And I can go into more of that later, but anyway. Is it possible to go back into time and change the decision? If that were true, I would do everything in my power to make that happen immediately, but I can't. I think that what Auburn did will come back and bite them. It already has bitten them, and in my opinion, which my opinion is proven true thus far, what we know, that we have become the Tennessee of college football. And we've become Tennessee. We will make coaching changes probably several times for the next decade or two and be in a constant cycle of non-stability. And I'm a huge fan of stability, and that's what Gus Malzahn provided. Now, to what degree of success we can debate on. But when I think if you remove that, you pull yourself out of that and look at the context of the situation they're in, Auburn was in the best possible situation for the current time, the current climate, the current success of other important factors from other teams in their conference and their division than they could have been in. Doesn't mean that we didn't need to make a change at some point, but it does mean that we were in the best possible situation at the time. So that's why we made such a huge mistake. All right, so here is, I think I've yammered on about that stuff and long enough. So here is what I think I know. And again, my source has been proven 100% correct thus far. And I'm not going to share everything that they know because I technically haven't been given permission to do this, but most of what I'm going to share here is out there anyway, or at least being discussed, so I feel confident that they're okay with me talking about that part of that. What I can tell you is this, is if my sources are correct, and they have been 100% correct so far, is there are different tiers now in the coaching search. And about who is favored, who's the top choice, all that kind of stuff. What you suspect is correct, that Kevin Steele is the number one choice. And my opinion alone, is that Kevin Steele is the best of a bad situation that we have put ourselves in. Doesn't mean that I necessarily wanted it, but it is the best of a bad, and I can go more detail on that later. There are technically 4 tiers and then some like honorable mentions mixed in there as well. What I'll tell you is based on what they say, is that tier number 2, and that's far down, is Steve Sarkisian and Billy Napier. So after that, I'm not going to address those because those are even less likely to happen. But there's a name in there that there's a name that I do want to talk about that's already been mentioned that I have at least changed my opinion on in terms of my willingness to maybe seek some excitement about it. I'm not necessarily excited about it just yet, but let me just address that there in a minute. Kevin Steele is the number 1 target, and that doesn't mean that he was at the beginning. I've said, and like I said, I've been proven true thus far, Mario Cristobal was that Cristobal out there that most people wanted in the public, and I think the administration was gaming for, but he played us, and I knew he was going to play us because he's a Bama acolyte. If y'all haven't learned this thus far, there's actually an active, and this sounds conspiracy theory, I know, but you got to take a step back and look at the picture as a whole. Have you ever noticed how there's these recruits that always seem to pick Auburn at the beginning, but then on signing day or right before signing day, they flip or they try to flip and stuff like that? There's other things besides recruiting as well. I'm 100% convinced that Mario Cristobal was never coming to Auburn. I think this was all part of a little ploy because he's a Bama acolyte. And I'm not saying that Bama's fully involved in all this. But anyway, Mario Cristobal was never coming, and I knew he wasn't coming. And that's proven true thus far. So now we're forced to make the best of a bad situation, and that's Kevin Steele. Because what it does is it maintains any stability that we have left in the program. It maintains it. It does. I know y'all don't want to hear that, but it does maintain that stability that was already ravaged because it keeps most of the staff together. It's a coach that was very highly favored until y'all had to force him or forced him into a situation to be considered of the head coach. And personally, I think that out of this bad situation, he's going to be the best possible option for the success of Auburn long term. Now, how long, we'll see. But for those of you that are trying to keep holding this banner that we can't promote Kevin Steele because he was not a successful head coach decades ago at Baylor, that's a weak argument. It really is. It's the same thing as saying Sarkisian is going to be a successful head coach at Auburn simply because he's having success at Bama right now. And let me address that. I do not want Steve Sarkisian at all. Like I probably want him worse or want him less than I wanted Mario Cristobal, and I mean that sincerely. Now I will support him if he comes to Auburn and find a way to be okay with it. For those of you that are brushing aside names like Hugh Freeze and Art Briles because of their past, why are you giving the pass to Steve Sarkisian? Steve has a dark past as well, and it's probably I think it's more recent, if I'm correct on timing, than Art Briles or Hugh Freeze. So if that's part of your argument, I would say you need to give the other two the time of day. Offenses change. Case in point, Gus Malzahn. He was, and he's still an offensive genius, but he was at the time the offensive genius and proved it for a time there. Things change. Defenses adjust. So if that's your reason, then you're not looking past the next couple seasons. You got to look further than that. And that's why we're in the situation that we're in right now, is because of thinking like that. So I do not want Steve Sarkisian. I also don't want to be a Bama acolyte, so that's why I don't want him. And that's why I didn't want Mario Cristobal. And yeah, so there. But if I have to make a case for a Bama acolyte, then there's some out there I can probably make cases better for because of other reasons. But let's address Billy Napier. So you fired Gus Malzahn because of mediocrity, but you want to go hire a coach at a mediocre program who's having a year of success. Okay. That doesn't make sense to me at all. Things change. You're not even comparing Power 5 to Power 5. You're comparing Power 5 to a mid-major program in conference. it will happen the exact same way it did with Gus Malzahn, guys. You will probably have a little bit of hype and success within the first 2 or 3 seasons, and then we'll be back here doing this again. In terms of liking Billy Napier as a person better, he's above Steve Sarkisian when I talk about those 2 tiers. No, that's a no for me, dog. I'll address a name out there that I have warmed up to in just a second. I know some questions have come through here, so let me kind of go back on those and talk about that a little bit. RD says, my opinion, it's been a long time coming. I forgot I could do this. And that may have made the good choice, but who knows? Yeah, I mean, I could be wrong, right? And that's the thing that when I've had these disagreements with people, and some people have taken it way too personally, I don't get that. If I'm wrong that this was the poorest decision that Auburn's made in a long time, Auburn wins, right? What's so wrong with that? If I'm wrong, Auburn wins. I'm okay with that. But if you're wrong, oh boy. So I just think impatience got the best of us. Let's see. Wiz Dragon, Gus Malzahn was a winning coach, never had a losing season his whole career at any level. Couldn't say it any better myself, my friend. RD, because every weekend he whistled the same tune. I guess that's what he's talking about with his reason why it came down. Sure. If you want to use this season against him, then you need to give every other coach a pass or not give them credit for this season, because it's I've never understood firing a coach after his first year with a new offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator, unless they pull a Gene Chizik and tank. That you can't really argue against. As much as you may not like it, and I did not, you can't really argue with that. But you expected in a COVID-19 year, with Chad Morris in his first year, installing his new system with a new quarterback, new wide receivers, all stuff, to have success. And what I always find funny is the people that do the thumbs down thing. I'm like, that's the most cowardice thing that you can do, because you won't offer your opinions here. But anyway, I don't know why. I shouldn't even acknowledge that, but it's just funny. And I don't think they realize is that when you give the thumbs down, it actually promotes the stream even further because you're reacting to it. Anyway, I'm hearing a lot about Urban Meyer. I am as well. He's not on the table. Who's not on the table? Hugh Freeze, Lane Kiffin, Urban Meyer. I'm trying to think of any other big names out there. Those 3, if you're on the Lane train, get off it. As of right now, if it changes, so be it. But as of what I know right now, Lane Kiffin is not an option. He wants it. He does want it. He's made a play for it. Nobody wants him, though. So Lane Kiffin is not an option. Urban Meyer is not. All in between. Wes Duck says, what I don't understand is how Auburn is not pursuing Lane, because we don't want to be Bama acolytes, and why they don't want him. I don't want him because, how about this? I want him more than some others because of the way he just sticks it in the craw of Nick Saban every chance he gets. So that endears me towards him. He's got a great offense, but it's the same argument that I have with Steve Sarkisian. His offense you cannot hire a coach because their offense looks good right now. You can't. Because if you're doing that, it's the same thing as Gus Malzahn, and that's the reason you didn't like him anyway. I'm not saying you, Wes. I'm saying people in general. If we fired Gus Malzahn, we said that this was not good enough, so why are we doing the same exact thing? Why not shoot for the stars and go for something much bigger? Urban Meyer would be in that camp, but do you really want a coach that wins a championship and then suddenly has a family issue or an illness issue and then has to leave every time? Or a program issue? I don't want that. I want stability. Oh, wow, I missed a lot of comments down here. Let's see. We can look at Nick Saban. Gus had a better record as a head coach than Saban had in his starting career. Yeah, I agree. You fired the head coach, the most winning head coach against Nick Saban currently that's active. Somebody threw out Tommy Tuberville had more wins over Nick Saban because of his time at LSU and all that stuff, which is true. You're not getting that guy back. He is stepped off into the swamp, so to speak. Napier long-term, Steele short-term. I disagree with that. I would flip-flop that. I would say that Napier is more favorable, but he is not on my list for what I want. I will accept him and I will support them if that happens. But, go with Steele for now. I mean, really, honestly, Ron, that is the best of a bad situation here. I mean, it really is. And I hate to break it to people. Y'all are going to have to be okay with it. And I know for a lot of people that are like me, and I think, don't let me speak for you guys, but the Duckworth family, Wes and Greg, I know that I'm pretty sure that y'all are in my camp on this in terms of the Gus Malzahn situation. We're going to have to lead the charge on being okay with that, because that doesn't. We were right about the Gus Malzahn firing, and that was a bad decision. But we're going to have to find a way to move past that and accept Kevin Steele at this moment. Everyone said that about Nick Saban. I missed that part. If Auburn wants a mediocre coach, hire Bobby Petrino. That's why we avoided that for years, and fortunately, we're making the same mistakes in a different way in a different time. I'm aboard with Steele, Blake says, as long as we put more points on the board. So think about it this way. You hire Kevin Steele, who's arguably one of the most, if not the most successful defensive coach over this period of time. And I will say to my dying breath, the best decision Coach Malzahn ever made was hiring Kevin Steele, despite maybe some behind-the-scenes things that may be going on. Because I think it helped him while he was going through a rough patch offensively at Auburn. So you hire him, and he hires a good OC. And he runs, for all of the people that want to be like Alabama, why not try to copy their formula? You've got a defensive-minded head coach running CEO. Let Kevin Steele do that. He brings in and lets an offensive coordinator do what they do. You can replicate that success the same way they do, just not be Alabama, just similarly. Lots of comments, guys. Y'all are awesome. Thanks for being here. And again, if you're enjoying what you're listening to, even if it's kind of doom and gloom a little bit, I hope that you are liking this. Here, I'll come back to some of the YouTube stuff instead. What about the backstabbing rumors with Steele? Well, they're rumors, right? So you can't put a lot of stock in them. However, based on what I know from my source, I would say there's a 60-40% chance that happened. There's a chance it didn't happen. There's also a chance it did happen. Based on what I know, I'm pretty sure there's a higher chance that it happened, which is unfortunate. But I try not to operate off of emotions. So when I talk to people about more important topics than this, especially, but anything, I try to talk about it within this spectrum. Let me address that in a second. Gus says, couldn't recruit O-line, make players better. Bo Nix has not gotten better. We'll talk about it in a second. Unfortunately, you're wrong. But I operate on this spectrum right here. So there's emotions, and then there's reality. Emotions versus reality. Emotions are real, and they're valid. But emotions and context. That's what I had that wrong. Emotions and context. Somewhere in the middle, they meet to form the reality. Both of those things on the outside are valid and should be taken with equal context, and they form the reality of the situation. Just because you didn't like losing 4 games while having good recruiting during an unprecedented era where Alabama has not seen success at the rate that they have during this time. Same thing for Georgia now. And same thing with a up and down interchanging Texas A&M and LSU. When you take into consideration that Gus Malzahn was the most successful against the best of the conference and in the country, arguably in Alabama, with what he was having to work with and the way he was being undermined by the administration and the boosters, which he was, the facts are there. Just got to look for them. You ever wondered why it's taken us so long to get an athletic facility to rival Alabama's? You ever wondered why Gus Malzahn donated $2 million of his own money to just get it going? Because he knew he was being undermined. And if he didn't pony up the cash, they never were going to catch up. So if you can't look at the context and say losing 4 games against the better opponents at the time, South Carolina, there's anomalies obviously everywhere. That was bad. I grant that losing to Tennessee a couple years ago, that was bad. But when you look at that as a whole, the emotions of the situation are put in better context, thus forming the reality. So I understand your opinion. It's just wrong, in my opinion. Let's see. I know I'm really behind on the YouTube addressing these questions right here. So let me kind of cut back here. Let's see. The key with Steele would be who would run the offensive side. I agree. Kind of already addressed that. JB says Napier took an 8-4, 3-9 team to an 11-team win in 2 years and a top 25 with little talent. So have many other coaches, and you're doing it in a conference that's not that good. I don't get on board with that argument. To me, it's the same thing as Mark Richt and Les Miles in terms of getting rid of Gus Malzahn. Is that what you're talking about? A winning coach, just not enough people satisfied with it. Gus took a 3-9 to a national championship game the very next year. It's a great point. You also need to consider, though, that those weren't his players. But he made it work, right? People want to say that that's luck and stuff like that. Luck is where opportunity meets preparation, right? If you're not prepared for it, you can't seize the opportunity. Luck's not necessarily a bad thing, folks. Then turned them into an 8-5 team the next year. Sure, JB. Sure. But unfortunately, and I'm not trying to be mean, but thinking like yours is what got us into this bad situation that we're in. And I'm not saying necessarily you, but thinking like yours. So please hear me when I say that. I'm not trying to be rude. Wiz, I think, yeah, we're on a better page than we thought we were. What's Malzahn's next move? Sit on $21 million and laugh and laugh and laugh. That's his next move. If you don't think Gus Malzahn is not sitting back just laughing, I hope he'll stay in Auburn if he doesn't go back to coaching, like Gene Chizik has, like Tommy Tuberville has for a time. I think it says something about Auburn as a community and as the Auburn family with the way the coaches and former players and even just everyday Auburn people like us come back to the community. It says a lot about it, and it's a great thing. What's the best thing that could happen from Auburn right now? And I would probably think Bill Clark would be an option for Auburn as a head coach. He's on the table. He's just not very up on the table. And I'm not. That's more of I am not a fan of rebuilds right now. So that's why he just doesn't make my list. But he's not one of the worst options out there in terms of a bad situation, which was my premise for the whole thing. All right. I never addressed who I'm warming up on, and then I'll keep moving down to these questions. Y'all are doing a great job keeping them coming, so keep it up. Tony Elliott is a name that's out there, and I know for a fact that he's on the list. To what degree, I won't reveal. It's not high up there, though, right now. So I just think Tony Elliott, I've kind of done a little bit more research, and I've warmed up to the idea of him a little. It doesn't mean that I necessarily want him, but I'm at least warmed up to it. Let's see. In the idea that you can sometimes get a class and win games, but never can. Us over the top. I missed that, Jay Galley, most of that. I'm sorry. He says he wants Elliott, so there we go. We can at least address that. I don't want Elliott, but I'm open to the idea of it. And the premise that this was a bad situation that we should have never been in the first place, I'm willing to entertain Elliott. Because when people ask me my short list, it was one name and one name only. And most of y'all that are new to this are going to laugh, but most of y'all are probably rolling your eyes that have been here for a while because you heard me say it 1,000 times. Dabo Swinney. If you are going to fire a top 10 buyout coach in terms of amount and value, you need to make a top 10 hire in terms of perception. None of the names that have been out there are top 10 hires. I'm sorry, y'all. Mario Cristobal is not a top 10 hire. He's not. His recruiting doesn't launch him up there. Lane Kiffin is not a top 10 hire. Urban Meyer has a better case for a top 10 hire. I just don't want him. So really, and I've gone through my list of what I want in a head coach and why Gus Malzahn checked all the marks for those. Conveniently, I know. Dabo Swinney is the only one that meets those and maybe exceeds those, which would be the only thing that works. So with that being said, I've taken a step back and looked at Tony Elliott's story and the fact that Dabo has really invested in him. I'm a huge Cody Burns fan, and I hate that he may not be a coach much longer at Auburn if everything changes the way it's going right now. It reminds me a lot of his story. So in terms of just emotions and feeling good about the situation, I've at least entertained the idea of Tony Elliott. So, yeah, I was even sitting on the couch back here with my wife last night as we were just kind of taking a break from the day. And she was like, what's that you're watching? I was like, I'm just watching something on YouTube about this potential candidate. I like him. I like him a lot. Just, I don't know if I like him enough to hire him right now. Wiz Dragon. There's one thing that could be a positive reason why we haven't announced a new head coach yet. Maybe we're waiting to after the conference championships or even playoff to announce. If you're referring to Mario Cristobal, that's a done deal. Or I guess you could be talking about Napier and stuff. Of course. I mean, I think that's part of the reason. I don't think that's the main reason. The main reason is because the Auburn administration royally messed this up and made a poor decision. And they're scrambling right now. What about Brian Harsin? I mean, it was a big name a couple years ago. How is that a top 10 hire? And this is just my opinions, guys. But if you fire a top 10 buyout, you need to hire a top 10 coach. Brian Harsin is not that. And when I say top 10, I'm not talking about their team is currently in the rankings. I'm talking about historically. Because we're Auburn. If we're supposed to be as good as we are, why are we making hires that are less than that? That's a little harsh, but that's not. I think you understand what I mean with that. I thought in 2017 Auburn would be national champions, but they blew some major plays. They also had some major injuries too. You got to look at the full context of that situation and understand what happens. Do you think James Franklin is top 10? It's a good question. Jay Galley, is that what it was? It's a good question. I'm willing to entertain that thought. I am. I'm willing to entertain that thought. I will tell you, he is not on the list, but he is at least being discussed. Is Cristobal really out? I saw his new Oregon deal would only be 8th in the SEC. Elvis, hey, what's up? By the way, Auburn Elvis runs the only and the best equestrian and Auburn equestrian podcast that here on the E2C network. So shout out to him. So if you haven't checked it out, you need to. We've got him in our backlog, and he'll be getting geared up again as equestrian spring season gets rolling out there. So, by the way, I just want to give him a shout out. He does great work over there, or over here for us. So that being said, I actually just blanked on your question because I wanted to give you a shout out. So repeat that again. If I can. I would love Urban, but we all know that isn't going to happen. He would never be in state to Staben. There's worse issues than that for having him. That's not a route I want to go down at all. It's a top 10 hire. Don't want it though. What? Oh, Elvis, you'll have to repeat your question. I am so sorry. I got so focused on giving you a shout out that I forgot your question. I got so many of these rolling in here on YouTube as well. People are like screaming, "Get to my question." Just bring in Art Briles and Kendall Briles and call it a day. If you're talking about head coach and offensive coordinator, no. In terms of Art Briles or Kendall Briles as the OC, sure. Cristobal's Oregon deal is weak by SEC standards. Couldn't Auburn beat it? They could. I don't want it. I don't want him. He's a Bama acolyte. All he has in his favor in terms of maybe proving that he's better in is recruiting than Gus Malzahn. He's won as many or made as many appearances in the Pac-12 as Gus did in the SEC. It is not an improvement of a hire. That's why I don't want Mario Cristobal. I would support him if he came. He's not. I promise you, Elvis, he's not on the list anymore. He was, but not anymore. Brian Harsin, everybody's talking about that would be interesting, but do you really want that? Is that worthy of a top 10 buyout? No. Overtime just said Kevin Steele. I guess that means maybe you are on board for that. Yeah, Dabo, my dream coach as well. So why does it have to be a dream? Why? If money's not an issue, right? It clearly wasn't for the boosters to get rid of Gus Malzahn, because I promise you, and I know for 100% fact, the money was not there to get rid of him by the administration. They're in a $30 million hole before the buyout. The boosters got rid of him, which is very sad, and the boosters ruined this whole thing. I guess I'm confused. You want a top 10 coach, but you want Steele. Steele to me is under these guys. Steele, the reason that I kind of rank him higher in that argument is because he maintains the stability of the program, in which we've already ruined the stability. But if you want to recover that and hold on to any stability left, Steele is your best option. If I have more time, I can get into that. But like we've been going a little bit longer anyway, and we'll be doing more streams like this. There's plenty of other times to talk about it. I doubt Dabo would leave Clemson for Alabama, much less Auburn. I don't think he's going to leave. That's why he's just my short list, and that's my opinion. And I understand the reality of it, but it's still my short list. He's the only one that checks off all the boxes for me currently. And but if we're supposed to be this big program that we all think we are, why are we settling for mediocre hires? And I get that once they're hired and they get here, it may prove not to be mediocre. But right now it's a mediocre hire, especially with a top 10 buyout. Kevin Steele maintains the program with what little stability we have left. And you bring in an offensive coordinator and let him do his job, and Kevin Steele takes the Nick Saban type of approach. That's potential quickest recovery for stability. Not talking about a quick hype and we win a championship and do this all again. I want long term. Can you name your short list? Dabo Swinney. That's it. That is the short list. That is my short list. It's not going to happen, but that is my short list. And I know he's not on the list as well. If you want me to talk in terms of what we're all talking about, and we kind of know the reality is, I mean, it's Kevin Steele. It was Hugh Freeze. He's not on the list, so I've removed him from it. Honestly, it's Kevin Steele, and then I'm willing to entertain right now Tony Elliott. That's about it. That's about it, honestly. But again, I will support whoever comes. Let's see. What's your opinion on Chadwell? I do not know who you're speaking of, JB. Is Chadwell just a one-hit wonder? Well, the fact that I don't know who you're talking about tells me my answer for that. Stability is overrated. We saw lots of teams with new coaches turn their programs around during the COVID year. Sure. I mean, yeah. I mean, I don't disagree with you, but that's what my priorities are. Stability, in my opinion, is not overrated. And that's why Auburn is the position that it's in currently to this day. Coastal Carolina head coach. How is that an improvement? You've got a successful coach in a mediocre conference. The whole I turned this program around in this conference, I don't bite on that at all. Was Gus really top 10 or was he overpaid? I mean, that's what you just asked right there, Auburn fan, was an opinion and a question. So your opinion is that he's overpaid. I think the thing that people miss about my take on this situation is that I never once, and someone finally realized this in the group of friends that we have here on the UTC network. They finally said it because people were just assuming this about me. Kyle, and I'm just speaking in third person because this is the way this guy said it. Kyle never argued whether Gus was overpaid or not, or said he wasn't. I never said he was or wasn't. I think that's a fair argument to have. But he was a top 10 hire in terms of his amount and how competitive he had us overall in an unprecedented era in what Auburn was having to compete against at this time. So I get what you're doing there, Auburn fan. You're stating an opinion in a question, but I never said he wasn't overpaid. I heard on another Auburn podcast, the shot Dan Quinn really quick. What do you think? Jake, I know he's been mentioned in in the list. He's not high up there. And do you really want a coach that can't maintain the 28-3 lead or something like that in the Super Bowl? Sounds an awful like Nick Saban. Not hear anything about Jamie Caldwell. I feel like it would be similar to Napier. I 100% agree. I would prefer Napier over Caldwell. But, Chadwell. Excuse me. I keep saying Caldwell. Chadwell. Mediocre hire that doesn't amount to the buyout that we just did. Guys, this has been a great stream so far with all your questions and comments. So this is what I love to do. I like to give my opinions, obviously, but I love to hear from you as well. The Mafia wants Steele so bad. They do. I still argue it's the best of a bad situation we never should have been in. Okay, let's see. Sorry, I'm just catching up here in chat window. Is it a dream until it's a dream until it becomes reality? Yes, and I think you're referring to the Dabo Sweeney thing. Yep. If you don't actually try for those dreams, you never know if they can become a reality, right? I don't understand why we're not going for it, and we're not. The only option is Lane Kiffin, Hillbilly says. He's the only one that can recruit against Bama. No, Cristobal could have. LSU and Georgia. Just imagine the banter between Lane and Hedge. Now, I will not disagree with you there. Lane Kiffin's biggest selling point is how he sticks it to Nick Saban. I will not disagree with you on that, which is why I was willing to entertain it. I just don't want to deal with Lane Kiffin. And I'm a fan of stability, and he has not showed the propensity to stay somewhere for a long time. No, not Steele. No freaking way if Steele is hired. I'm a new UAB fan. Well, then you're not an Auburn fan. You're not an Auburn family member. I know you're probably just being funny there, but I'll be honest with you. If that's truly your opinion, you're not a true Auburn family member. Because it shouldn't matter who the head coach is. You should support him no matter what. I hope you were just being funny, though. But based on some of these other comments, I'm not so sure. If Steele is hired, we're screwed. We're already in that situation, my friend, when we fired Gus Malzahn. So I've tried, and I know some of y'all are just now getting here. I've tried to help y'all understand that are part of the Stop the Steal program that you're making the situation worse. You better get ready because it's coming. Right now, it's coming. Let's see. Do you think Chad Morris will stay at OC? And then Hillbilly said, no, see, this is the thing I have with your opinions, Hillbilly, is that you're operating off of emotions here. And your comment here about Malzahn as a high school coach with a gimmick offense, once others figured it out, game over, he's way over his head. You're operating off of emotions right now. The whole, you can't judge Chad Morris as an OC at Auburn in 1 year in a COVID-19 year. That's not a fair assessment. You know, if he had gotten 2 years, even with the COVID-19 being the first year, and then we'd had similar situations, I'd say, okay, bad hire. That's not a fair statement to Gus for the hire, and that's not a fair statement to Chad Morris of his assessment as an offensive coordinator when his prior history says otherwise. Now, his head coaching ability, Chad Morris, that being, we can talk about that. I agree with you about the Lane situation, though, Hillbilly. I do. What kind of offense would Bo do better in? I think he would have been fine in this one. See, that's the thing is that I think people miss. I got a little bit like wound up there, not at you or anybody, but like that's the thing that people miss. Bo would have been fine in this scenario. You just had to be patient. That's it. That's all this took. I think Steele would be a terrible head coach, and the defense would regress. Well, that's where Auburn and Elvis, so I diverge. Just because we're part of a network doesn't mean we don't disagree, and I have 100% disagreement on that. Fortunately, it looks like I lost the Twitter folks again. See, what I can't figure out is that you put the do not disturb on your phone on, and then a call still comes through. I don't get it. So that we just lost them, unfortunately. Okay, well, anyway, so for those of you that are here, I usually stay here for a few more minutes after I end the stream because I just like to help you guys. I'd be here for you guys a little longer because you're subscribing on here and it's something we're trying to build over here. So just a little incentive. So thank y'all so much. If you haven't, please consider hitting that subscribe button and the notification bell because the important thing here is I don't do these on a scheduled basis or even every day because it's really based on what there is to talk about. And there's a lot to talk about right now. So if you want to know when I'm going live, you need to be subscribed and have that notification bell marked because then you won't miss it. And I saw someone just hit the like button. So if you enjoyed the stream thus far, please do hit the like button. It does help the stream out. Hillbilly, here's the thing, buddy. Would you say that to Gus Malzahn's face? You wouldn't. You wouldn't. He's a better coach than you are. I guarantee that. Brandon says, I feel like you avoid the question about Chad Morris. Do you think he remained? Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to avoid it. I just got on a tangent. Do I think? Right now, no. I mean, because he was Gus Malzahn's guy, right? And then the premise is we got rid of Gus Malzahn, and that wasn't working, so why would you keep him, right? I think if Kevin Steele takes the job like I think he will bring in someone, another big name offensive coordinator hire. So I did not mean to avoid the question. It simply was I got on a tangent. And then, when you're bouncing between streams, it's like, and I got to catch Twitter when it comes up. It's hard to do. That's why I always tell the Twitter folks to come over here. Everyone is reflecting back to when Kiffin was at the Vols. Do you mean that in a good way or a bad way? I'm not sure. Let's see. All right, Hillbilly. Okay, thank you. Yeah, I did not mean to avoid that question at all. I have a very bounce back forth mind, but anyway. It's easy to say those things, Hillbilly, when you're over the social media and there's no face to name. And I'm not trying to pick on you and be mean towards you. I've just met people, and I've been this way too. You'd never say that to his face. I promise you. You can say you would all you want right here. You would not. And he's still a better coach than me or you or anybody else. So the fact that you want to insult him because you think he's a high school coach shows me you're not willing to talk about reason. Everyone is talking bad about Kiffin and is referring to when he was at the Vols. I'm not just talking bad about that. I'm talking about the way he left USC. He has not stayed anywhere for a long time, so he's not shown a stability factor. He's had some bad history facts, and if you know any of the rumors, and sometimes where there's smoke, there's fire, about his personal choices, I'll leave it at that. Then that kind of like negates your argument for him versus Hugh Freeze or Art Briles, right? Because personal issues as well in the past can't really build Kiffin up more than him because of that. He just doesn't, to me, show the maturity that I want in a head coach. And that's my personal preference. So I'm not just knocking him for Tennessee. And I think that's what we have to do in this discussion about anything, but this as well. Everybody wants to focus on one part of the issue. They don't want to look at the picture as a whole. That's why I talk about emotions and context meeting somewhere for reality. My emotions about Kiffin are he's a bad stability coach, but my also emotions about him is I think it's hilarious how he sticks it to Nick Saban all the time. Those aren't really reasons to just make the decision. And then there's the context over here of about his history. It falls more on the negative side for me. Oh, Hillbilly. I love you, dude. I do. You're just a funny dude with a funny name, which is funny. Let's see. I dread the day when Gus becomes Bama's OC. Wouldn't that be hilarious, though? What a way to stick it in the craw all these Auburn fans here that are. So here's the thing that's frustrating to me is I have had several people that are still adamant in that Gus needed to be fired, but they admit that this was the wrong time to do it. And I think that's what people miss is I've never, ever said that Gus didn't need to be fired someday. People think that when I'm such a staunch supporter of him that I would never be open to that conversation. Had he had a Gene Chizik like a year, as much as I like the dude, it's hard to make that argument, right? But he didn't have a Gene Chizik type of fallout. He had a stable program. To what degree we can discuss, but yeah. Our red Ford tube, I guess. Excuse me. Mario Cristobal doesn't want to face Nick Saban. Saban will get him fired every few years on the Plains. Exactly my point. Nobody wants to come here right now. And I think that's what many of you are missing in my argument of this. If nobody wants to come here right now, then why are we firing Gus Malzahn? Point blank. Nobody in there who's not desperate for a higher position, a higher, better coaching position, they don't want this job at all. Right decision, wrong time. Well, Brian, let me be clear. I'm still of the opinion it's the wrong decision, period, unless some other things would have happened in a longer Gus Malzahn tenure. But that's just me. But yes, I can get on board with thinking right decision, wrong time. It could have been the right decision with a little bit more time, but not right now. Do you think Urban is looking for a job? Well, he's always looking for a job, but he's also looking for his next job to leave as well, which is why I don't consider him. I said, Hillbilly, unfortunately, I don't like to ignore people that are putting comments, but you're kind of just being belligerent. So I don't know what you're asking for the truth on. You're waiting. And again, you're flexing and bowing here when we're not doing this face to face. And it's kind of, it's a little childish. I'm trying not to be mean to you, buddy, but you're kind of making yourself look like a jerk. Brian, our recruiting was ranked 42 when Gus was fired. It's a great point. It's 1 year. Okay, that's your best? 1 year. That's it. I understand Kiffin's stability is a question, but people say he's a snake in the grass. Look how Phil Fulmer took Johnny Major's job. That's a snake in the grass. Yeah, I mean, look, there's snakes in the grass everywhere. You know who wasn't a snake in the grass? Gus Malzahn. So look, I'm probably getting a little overboard here on just kind of going back to Gus Malzahn, but that's been my take throughout this whole thing, guys, is that this is a bad decision at the worst possible time. And here we are. The guy that they wanted, Mario Cristobal, played us, and I knew he was going to. And it's not good. It's not good, guys. I pride myself typically, and I know you wouldn't think about it here, being an optimistic person and thinking the best of the situation. But sometimes I have to just take a step back and say, this is bad. And this is bad. It's very, very bad. And it can get better, and it will get better at some point. But whereas it could have gotten better quicker under Gus Malzahn, this will be something that sets Auburn football back for decades. And I mean that sincerely. And if I'm wrong, Auburn wins, and we're all happy, right? So there's nothing wrong with me having that opinion. JB says Gus is good at losing 4 to 6 games a year. I don't know when he lost 6 games. So you'll have to that 1 year. I think it was 2014. But yeah, so one time. If you want to stay average and have a good season every 3 years, then keeping him is the right decision. So on that note, JB, and I think this will maybe round out my thoughts here today because we've been going a long time. I usually don't go this long, but y'all have been so great with questions and comments, and so that's what I'm here for. And so I really appreciate that. I'm not trying to get up on my pedestal here, but I just want to give you guys my full perspective on this. So just hear me out. I'm not trying to put up myself on a pedestal or anything like that, but I'm just trying to be honest. I'm a Christian, and there are more important things in life to me than Auburn, first of all, but Auburn winning especially. So to me, my most important thing is how Auburn wins than how often do they win. And what I mean by that is how our coach reflects Christ. And for me, you won't find, other than Dabo Swinney, from what I know about him, out there a coach who reflects that like Gus Malzahn. To me, and this is hold true for me and many others, winning is not satisfying. How you win and how your coach reflects Christ is much more satisfying. And I'm just being honest. So this was a situation where even taking the Christian perspective out of it, Auburn chose to value winning more than integrity. And it will never, ever be enough. And so that's why I maintain that I was satisfied, and I know that's not a fun word for me to use, with Gus Malzahn because of what he could have meant for the program longer term, but what he was as a man and what there's one thing you cannot argue about Gus Malzahn from what we know about his program right now is that he had high class, high integrity guys as a collective, there are always outliers. There are some better than others. But as a collective, none of y'all can debate that. And that, to me, made me more proud than anything to have Gus Malzahn as a coach. And why this hurts so bad. It really does. A.U. Robinson says you need more subs. I appreciate it. I guess you mean that in a good way. And that's why we're doing these more often. Hope that that'll continue to grow that way. Because like I said, we're a podcast network. And if you haven't checked out our podcast, please do. You can find it by going and searching E2C Network. But we wanted to do some other things as well to reach you guys in different formats because I know some of y'all don't know about us. But we've been doing this for almost 7 years now in different capacities. Just tired of being average while at school, the same state. So that's your problem. Stop looking across the state. Worry about us. Worry about Auburn. Stop worrying about Alabama. That's what got us in this situation. Doesn't mean you can't like use them in comparisons and stuff like that, but like and just stop looking across the state. Let's see. Why would Jeff Monker not be considered for the position? I have no clue who that is, and that should tell you something. Then we should never fire Chiz, awesome Christian man. But yes, so Brian, so by my assertion there, yes, on the surface, I agree with you, but remember what I said earlier, if you were here earlier in the stream. There becomes a point where I can't argue just on that alone when the program, and just because, and that's what I said. Remember what I said. The program as a collective, not one individual. So just because Chiz is a good Christian man and it seemed to reflect in his life, you could look at the program and what was going on tumultuously and just say, one man did not make a difference in these kids' lives. As a collective, it seems like. Individual cases, yes. But as a whole, Gus Malzahn, look at the way the players responded to the firing of Coach Malzahn. I trust their decision and their opinions more than yours, just to be honest. I do. I trust them more than you because they know the man we don't. And they know what he was having to deal with. We don't. If Gus would have not gotten fired and lost 4 or 5 games next year, would your opinion on him change? If so, firing him was the right decision. If Gus would have not got fired and lost 4 to 5 games next year, would your opinion on him change? No, because that's still a winning season. And remember what I just said in my diatribe, I guess you could call. That's not the most important thing to me. It's how our coach reflects Christ. And I know that for those of you that may not be Christians and those of you that don't understand that concept, I know it seems hokey, but I promise you it's much more satisfying. So was he still a winning head coach? Yes, he would have been in that scenario because he would have made him 7-5 or 8-4. Yeah, I would have been fine. Doesn't mean that I like it. I prefer 11 or 12-0. But some things you just have to look in context for. Let's see. I'm with you, and I believe most other programs would be satisfied as well, but when fans are using Bama as a barometer, we'll never be satisfied. And that's why you have to stop looking across the state. And that's the sad thing. Because we made a decision because of Alabama. We didn't make a decision because of Auburn. It's really what it amounts to. When you really pin this thing down to it, it was all about Alabama, not about Auburn. And that is not the Auburn way. Jeff Monker is Army's head coach. Well, I mean, if you think it'd be an Army, it'd be a high character guy, hopefully. So maybe on that front he wins. But again, how is that? I don't know if you were here earlier. We talked about how is that an upgrade from Gus Malzahn in what we know right now. It's not. Then we should hire a high school coach if he's, I guess you meant if he's a good Christian man who goes 6-4 every year. In my opinion, in what's important to me and what I've found true in my life, sure. I know you're being a little bit funny in that. I don't think you meant that mean, hopefully. Not being like some other people. But I don't know where you stand on that, JB. That's me personally. But I promise you, you will never be satisfied with winning. And when I say that, doesn't mean that you have to accept losing. It just means you have to place more value on something much greater than a win and loss column. And to me, the fact that we had a coach who was a consistently winning coach, to what degree we can argue, with the type of character he had and was seemed to be reflected as his program as a whole, which no one is disputing. Auburn just gave up a chance to have the next Shug Jordan. And if you look at Shug Jordan, who is our Bear Bryant, you look at his record when we hold him in such high regard. Oh, he was awesome. Have you ever looked at his record and his consistency factor in having winning seasons? It's not as good as you think it is. But why do we look at him as our Bear Bryant? Because he stood for something so much more than winning. And he won along the way. It came. Took a while. It only happened one time. One national championship in 30 years. Times have changed, haven't they? It's pretty sad. All right. Let me, since I've gotten on my pedestal a couple times here, let me just remind you, for those of you that are Auburn fans watching this. The story of Auburn is this. It's the story of Pat Sullivan and Shug Jordan. If you don't know the story, it goes similar to this. I'm probably butchering some details, but essentially it's this. Pat Sullivan, our Heisman Trophy winner eventually, was a highly recruited player out of Birmingham. And obviously Alabama and Bear Bryant wanted him just as bad as Shug and Auburn did. Well, it came time for Shug to come meet with him. And Shug, went to his home. And the plan was that day for them to go to something in Birmingham. I think it was a semi-pro football game or something like that. They were walking. They spent some time together and decided to go and just take a walk to the stadium because it wasn't far from Pat Sullivan's house. And as they're walking along, the motorcade comes. A motorcade comes along and goes by, and the crowds are screaming, "Ah!" and following it. Well, you know who it was. It was Bear Bryant, heading to the same location, but with bigger pomp and circumstance. Shug Jordan looks over at Pat Sullivan and sees the look in a young 18-year-old's eyes and sees the glamour and the glitz stealing him away. And Coach looks at him and says one simple thing. Son, you can do one of two things. You can either go off into the limelight with him, or you can take a walk with me. And aren't we glad that he chose the harder route, maybe the least guaranteed successful route. But he chose us, and we got a Heisman Trophy candidate and one of the most revered quarterbacks in college football history. So the story of Auburn is the story of Shug Jordan and Pat Sullivan. The team that took the harder road, maybe not maybe the least successful road, or the less successful road in terms of public perception, but they chose it, and we look back on it as something to be revered and honored. So anyway, Noah, I think you're just getting. He says Auburn's. That's smack my head. I don't know what that's to. If it's my story, whatever. But anyway, so that's kind of it. That's my perceptions on this, and that's my little last minute soapbox here. Let's see, Hillbilly. How often do you see a coach get fired and the players agree? Never. They always support their leader. You didn't pay attention during the Gene Chizik era. You didn't pay attention to that. But you're just being contradictory for the sake of being contradictory. It's kind of been your MO today. But I hope you come back because you're entertaining. I agree that there's not many options right now, and that could be considered an upgrade. However, Gus has been fired, so why go with Steele and not look for a coach that is at least better than Steele because it maintains the stability of the program? Point blank and simple. That's my take on it, but doesn't mean it's right. Know about Oregon coach being out. Are you saying that it's not out? He's out. From my sources that I tell you, it's not out, but maybe because he wanted to be. Or Auburn wanted him to be, but he's out. My source has been 100% correct thus far. At this point, I just want a coach who can build our players in terms of character and on the field. 6-4 is a winning season, but what do you get to show for it in the Birmingham Bowl? Well, you have to ask yourself the question. And, I mean, this is your personal thing, and I'm not judging either way. I'm just telling you what has proven true in my life and many others is that winning to the degree that you're saying will never be enough. I promise you. Find something higher to search for, to be satisfied with. Gus will be joining Nick Saban's staff on the rehab fired coach soon. And it will be hilarious, too. It will be hilarious. Not for Gus. I mean, for Gus, but against us. Anyway, all right. I have gone way longer than I intend to do every time. But, guys, this has been one of our best streams thus far, other than the breaking news of Gus being fired, obviously, because that broke the internet pretty much. Thank y'all so much for being here. We ask that if you like what you enjoyed watching today, if you'll please consider the like button. And I hope that you'll hit the subscribe button and the notification bell so you'll know when we go live, since we don't do these on a regular basis. It's kind of whenever I have time to do them. Want to just see you guys here more often and have some other great conversations. Also, if you've not checked out our podcast, you can find it just by searching up E2C Network. On any podcast app. If it's not on your preferred one, let me know. I will get it there for you to the best of my abilities. And we also have like a separate one. It's called Auburn Roots. It's a separate series, has its own feed. You can search that up on its own on the podcast. And it's a series of Auburn people telling their Auburn stories. It's a great thing you do not want to miss. If you know the story of Dee Ford, she's episode number 1. Don't want to miss it. Other than that, if you want to look for ways to help support us as a content creator, we are always interested in sharing with you about our booster club. You can find over at patreon.com/E2C Network. You can sign up for as little as $1 a month and get yourself some perks and help support the content we create here. Thank y'all so much for being here. War Eagle to you, and I'm sure we'll have plenty to talk about very soon.